In a post-Double Direct world, the one question on everyone's mind is that the last Nintendo Switch Direct? And I don't think so. Good morning, Mario, and good morning, Switch fans. Yeah, yesterday's show was not the greatest, although Peglin is super cool, and I'm starting to come around on those Castlevania DS collection games because I saw the layout and how nice it is to have the bottom screen mixed up with the top screen on one OLED screen, and that's pretty hot, and that's better than any layout I've ever seen for these games, and they are really quality games, so that gives one little point to the partner showcase that otherwise was pathetic in my opinion. But alas, enough about that. What's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. Hit that like button if you enjoy these videos, and we are going to talk about another Direct. But first, MEO, The Smiling Man, came out, and the reviews are here. Well, it didn't come out yet. The reviews came out. The game is about to come out, but all the demos are out, I think. It comes out tomorrow. Thursday is Nintendo release date, and MEO grabbed a 78, which I find very funny in this screenshot, because it's a point better than Star Wars Outlaws. I guess that's what the smile was for all along. Boom, shakalaka, Nintendo drops Ubisoft with a Famicom Detective Club game. Now, in all seriousness, I think Star Wars Outlaws is really, really cool, but we're not here to talk about that. Let's instead talk about what people like and don't like about MEO. Look, it boils down to, if you're a fan of visual novel detective type games, MEO seems like a very chilling plot with a lot of memorable moments and a somewhat archaic system of how you navigate the interface, the world, and the conversations themselves. As long as you're on board with that, it seems like MEO is a stupendous story with a super cool mystery, and I gotta say, I really want to find out. Something about The Smiling Man is just so weird and so immediately grabbing, even though it's so dang similar to that stupid movie Smile that the trailer plays before every movie I've ever seen in the last 3 months. I'm kind of just wanting to play the full thing of this. The demo kind of did sell me in a strange way. Alas, if you're not into that style of game, some people were very frustrated, feeling like it was plotting and difficult and at times very cumbersome to just get to the plot, and they wanted it to operate more like a visual novel as opposed to this detective game where you are sort of having to participate in the conversations and ask through a menu system that, I'll admit, at times was a bit clunky, but that's part of its charm in my opinion. This is trying to be a new old school game, and there's a lot of that lately, and usually they're actually fun. I feel like in the era we are in now, bringing back older mechanics, if in a new game, can actually be super sweet. So let me know if you're going to pick up MEO, The Smiling Man, or you're going to be saving your money for Zelda. That's probably what most of you will do. And maybe you should save your money for another Nintendo Direct. Now, this is a big conversation point because everybody's kind of been waiting for the crossover, right? The crossover where the Nintendo Switch crosses the Rainbow Bridge and we never hear from it again. It's all about the Switch 2. Now, we're getting very close to that point, and I do think Nintendo Switch 2 is bound to be revealed very soon. I think next month seems like the best time for that to happen. The only reason they would move from September to do a double direct in August seems to be to clear the slate for a different type of show in September where they unveil Switch 2 before it goes to full production and it sneaks out of that factory. Alas, let's not talk about Switch 2. Let's talk about Switch 1 and the fact that I think there are guaranteed more games to be shown off for Switch 1. I think it's inevitable and 100% that there are more first-party Switch 1 games that we do not know about. And my question for you is, where do these pop? Where do these pop? People were saying that maybe yesterday was the last Switch Direct, and as I thought about that, I said, gosh, that's sad. If that is the way that this generation ends in terms of presentations, sucks. So many Nintendo Directs were so killer, so stellar, and so year defining for me. There were so many great moments where we got, oh my gosh, all of a sudden the Squid Kids messing around turns into Smash Bros. Ultimate. All of a sudden Isabelle is there getting a letter. Amazing things were happening, and it was very, very, very just momentous. It was monumental, and it made marks in my memory that will probably never go away. Metroid Prime 4 getting a logo back in the first year. Holy crap. I don't want to see the presentations whimper out because I felt like yesterday's was a whimper. But where are you going to talk about the games that are coming out in February, March, and maybe even April or May? Where are you going to reveal the games that Nintendo has beyond Donkey Kong Country Returns HD early next year? It really feels like that is probably the January title, given how early it was revealed, and that we know Nintendo does love the January slot. They always like to have a Switch game in that month, and I think they will once again. Therefore, February, March, April, if you believe that this system is coming out at the earliest in May, then you still have 3 months of games for Nintendo to get through. That's a full quarter when you think about it financially and from the perspective of investors. And I don't think Nintendo is just going to skip out on a quarter of releases as they wait for their new system. It's incredibly valuable and lucrative for Nintendo to continue to pop out software for a system that has an install base of 140 million growing players. So, where will Nintendo discuss these things? I suppose everything could be a Twitter drop, but knowing Nintendo, I mean, look at the show yesterday. They felt like that assortment of games was worth having a presentation for. They felt like that assortment of titles was worth hyping everyone up and doing a live stream and not just like a pre-recorded video that you could scrub through. This tells me that Nintendo will probably have another presentation. Now, will it be a hybrid presentation that merges some Switch 2 games with some Switch 1 games? That's going to have to be a reality that we face if this system is in fact announced in September or October. If the Switch 2 comes out next month or the month after in terms of its reveal, then every subsequent Direct is going to probably have a mishmash of both. And how Nintendo decides to separate those, how they decide to distinguish between titles, how backwards compatibility fully works out, how cross-gen fully works out, we still have to figure all of those individual points out as time progresses. But I do think there's going to be another show with Switch 1 dedicated games. I think that Kirby game that we've seen teased and leaked and the screenshots is going to come to fruition and probably come out early next year as a holdover title as we wait for Switch 2. I think there's probably another game in March, which could be a Mario Baseball, it could be a Star Fox, it could be something in the Pokemon franchise that comes out and tides us over. There's also 2 major Switch games that we don't know how they're going to handle their release in terms of which system or both they release on. Pokemon Legends ZA and Metroid Prime 4 Beyond have both been announced for Switch, which tells me that they are coming out on Switch, and then they may also come out on Switch 2. Now, if they release after the launch of Switch 2, those could be cross-gen releases that happen at the same time. They could also just be next-gen only releases that only drop on the Switch 2. But given that we don't know the release date of Switch 2, there's a chance that one or both of these games come out before that system launches. Look, Pokemon Legends ZA has not shown anything indicating that it's probably a late 2025 title, but they did release Pokemon Legends Arceus in January. That was an early year game, and if they wanted to follow a similar pattern, they could. They'd have to activate marketing almost immediately, but maybe that game is like the March game. Maybe that game is a big deal for the first half of the year, and it does focus on Switch 1. In that case, they need some sort of presentation to highlight and detail this game, and I don't think Twitter drops are going to work for things that cover an entire quarter. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond could have a similar fate where it releases, say, in April on Switch 1, and then later again on Switch 2, or maybe they hold it over and decide to wait and they say, hey, we're going to release it simultaneously on Switch 1 and Switch 2 with these performance upgrades on Switch 2. Who knows? But there is a chance that they release that first on Switch, in which case Nintendo would want to get out ahead and talk more about Metroid Prime 4 because we know very little beyond what we saw in that initial trailer. So there's multiple titles here, as many as 4 games I feel, and maybe even 5, that Nintendo is going to put out before the Switch 2 is purchasable on store shelves. How do they dictate those plans? How do they describe those games? How do they show them off with bows, nods, and Nintendo Switch headlines? I think there's going to have to be another presentation. Now, the kind of awkward, quirky bit here is if they announce the Switch 2 and then do another Direct, how do they sort of separate out the games? And this is sort of the only caveat I have where maybe Nintendo goes into weird mode and does not do a presentation because they feel like with the new console announced, it would be weird to talk about Switch games in a presentation fashion without talking more about Switch 2 games. But we do know that 3DS games were featured in the early segments of Nintendo Switch Directs, and so therefore we could easily get Switch 1 and Switch 2 games in the same Directs separate segments. It might help once we know the full actual retail title of the Switch 2, and if it's something a little bit more defined and different, it would be easy to segment and say, hey, this presentation will focus both on Switch 1 games as well as Super Switch Pro games, and then players just have to know, and maybe they'll come up with an interesting border or some way to sort of highlight why this is, and let players know, let customers know this is just a Switch 1 game, this is a Switch 2 game, yada, yada, yada. But the other thing is, if there is full backwards compatibility like we expect, then everything that you show for Switch 1 can easily be a Switch 2 game as well. Maybe it doesn't have a Switch 2 performance mode. Maybe it isn't made exclusively, specifically for the Switch 2. But if there's complete backwards compatibility, then a combined presentation is even easier to advertise for, because you just say all these games are coming to Switch 2, and then some of them are also on Switch 1. Who knows? Maybe Nintendo won't even have any exclusive games to start off, and everything will be just playable on both cross-gen, sort of how we experienced with both PlayStation and Xbox. Like, yeah, maybe the new 3D Mario is one game that's exclusive to Switch 2, but there's a very possible future where majority of the titles release on both, and a presentation could easily just cover everything. And for those reasons, it seems very likely to me and highly probable that there will be another Switch 1 emphasized, Switch 1 focused Nintendo presentation. Will it be a Direct Mini, a General Direct, a Combo Direct? I don't know how they're going to handle or label it, but this is not the last we've seen of Nintendo Switch 1 in presentations. And phew, because I did not think yesterday was a great way to go out, and I'm glad that there will be another chance for Nintendo to kind of have like their moment. Maybe they can end with Metroid Prime 4 as like a fun way, a callback to the early directs of 2017. Maybe they can finally release Hollow Knight Silksong to shut up all the fans that are screaming for that game. Maybe they'll end the Switch 1 announcements with a tease of a new Switch 2 game. There's plenty of ways that they could make this a pretty cool moment, and I think that there absolutely will be another direct focusing, at least partially, on Switch 1. Now, when will that take place? February seems like a very good bet. But if these games are going to come out in February or March, it's pretty late. Is there a world where Nintendo does a weird like November or December Direct? I think there is. Or maybe even an early January show. It's quite possible that Donkey Kong Country Returns HD could get a date on Twitter, and then Nintendo announces the Switch 2 in September or October, and then has a January presentation emphasizing the Switch 2, but maybe also showing Switch 1 games. I think we're going to get another one before the next scheduled Direct. I think before February's like typical time frame Direct, we're going to get another Nintendo presentation that does show new games for the Switch 1. And we're entering uncharted weird territory because Direct plans are going to be off pattern, as we saw by a double Direct yesterday, and because we're entering new console season, which means things are going to be askew, and Nintendo needs to cater mostly to that demographic and mostly to the audience waiting to purchase the new system, but also to the audience that has the current system, and that kind of throws things out of whack and will get things into a way where we're not expecting when their presentations will be, because it will be atypical. So let me know in the comments down below if you agree. Another Switch 1 Direct? I think it's a shoo-in, but I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Love you lots. SwitchForce out.